Hi, I'm Otto Penzler. I'm at the Mysterious Bookshop in Manhattan for our weekly show about mysteries and rare books and collecting. And today we're going to talk about somebody that you may not have heard of. It was a very popular writer in the late 19th century, early 20th century. I would say Victorian and Edwardian era, but she was American, and so that we don't usually talk about Victorian writers as being American writers. I say she, although the books are have a byline of Lawrence L. Lynch. The author's real name was Emma Murdoch, and she took her first husband's name, Lawrence Lynch, because it was a little bit harder to be published as a mystery writer in America as a woman. Now, the ground was largely broken by Anna Catherine Green with the Leavenworth case in 1878. Pardon me. And most people call that the first detective novel by a woman, by an American woman, although in fact Celie Register wrote The Dead Letter a decade earlier. But the Leavenworth case is very famous. Emma Murdoch, Lawrence Lynch, wrote Shadowed by Three in 1879, 1 year after the Leavenworth case. It's a largely forgotten book, and it doesn't deserve to be. She was quite talented, but so much of her stuff is relatively obscure. It wasn't reprinted frequently the way Anna Catherine Green was, and so people have forgotten who she was. Even Goodreads, this major website which lists all kinds of books, lists her as the author of 6 books, another place of 9 books. In fact, she wrote 20 books, and they are in a variety of subgenres. She wrote about private detectives, which was very unusual in the 1880s, 1890s. There were very few private detectives. She also wrote about lawyers. She also wrote about police. She had a series character who appeared in a couple of books, but mainly they were standalone books. And they're quite scarce. Although she was American, she was born in Illinois and lived in America her whole life. She became much more successful, much more popular in England. And some of her later books were published only in England, not in America. But this is a copy of Shadowed by Three. This is her first book. This is the one I said was 1879, 1 year after the Leavenworth case. And it's a reprint. I don't have a first edition. It's very scarce. This is about 4 years after the first edition. This is published by Chicago. Since she was a Chicago resident, Illinois resident, but in Chicago, her first publishers were in Chicago. And there you see the 1883 on the title page, but the copyright page, which I will get to as soon as I possibly can. Here we go. You can see the date is 1879, which is what the title page should say if it were a first printing. It's not. So as an early vintage book, it's $45, but it's not the first. One of her more popular books was Against Odds. And here's the American edition. This is the true first. Again, it's Chicago. A major publishing company at the time, which we now remember as a publisher of maps. But Rand McNally was a major publisher of fiction, nonfiction, and other kinds of books. And this is a first edition. And here on the copyright page, you can see the date. Rand McNally frequently showed second, third, fourth printing, etc. And there's nothing here, so this is the first edition. Now, it looks pretty much like most books of that time. Not particularly interesting. Nice, clean copy in very nice condition, $100. The condition of these, Rand McNally made very high quality books, so it holds up really well, unlike Donnelly, who there you can see there's wear at the spine and so on. It's just much more wear on it. whereas this is fresh for a book that's 125 years old. But the same title was published in England, and look how cool the cover is. This is the first British edition, and while people do collect Lawrence Lynch, they mostly, even though the true firsts are American, they mostly collect the British editions because they look so much cooler with these great color covers. There's Wardlock, and Wardlock generally will show the date on the title page in that era. In that era, if Wardlock did not show the date on the title page, it's generally a reprint. But they were not consistent, and so each book has to be judged on a per book basis, on an individual basis, because there was no general rule that would follow. This, even though it's the first British rather than the first edition, it's also $100. Again, because it's much more collected than the American editions. And this is true for many of the books. I'll show you, I love 19th century literature, and so I have quite a lot of these. I won't show you everything because there are so many books here, but here's a British edition without all the fancy cover. As you can see, it's a very plain cover, just like the American editions were. And this is a later title. And here's Wardlock, as you can see, no date on the title page. So it's a reprint. And it's $45. It's 1890s, I don't know exactly, I can't remember the date, or 1900, but it's certainly the same era. Here's Dangerous Ground. This is again Chicago, another Chicago publisher. Alex Lloyd, 1885, a company that I don't believe exists anymore. And yeah, they almost always had illustrations, line drawings, not particularly highly professional, but pretty nice. And you can see that I showed you the 1885 on the title page, and here's the copyright page, which also has 1885, which is a very good way that American publications in that era would show the true first as having a matching date on the title page with the copyright page. It's not very exciting, but look at this. Isn't that a great cover? You just have to love these wonderful covers. I'm sure this is also a Wardlock edition. Wardlock was a major publisher at that time. And here you can see that it's the first British edition because there's the date on the title page. $1895. Here's another one, also Wardlock. A Slender Clue. Most of these British first editions are $85 or $100. They're all about the same range. This one's more. Again, there's Wardlock, and there's the date on the title page, indicating that it's the first British. There were some books that came out in the same year in England and the United States, and sometimes it's hard to tell if which one is the true first and which is not. Here's a title that's very unusual. This is a very uncommon book. Not the kind of title that you would expect from a mystery novel, which a book like that title tells you much more that it's going to be a mystery about a theft and of jewels and so on, a common theme in books in those days. This is an American edition. It's the true first. Laird and Lee, again, Chicago publisher. Unlike some of the other publishers, they did not put a date on the title page, but they did use the date on the copyright page. And if you look at the right reference books, you can tell what the year was of the first printing. And again, there's no indication that it's of a second printing or third printing, and so it's generally safe to assume that that is a first edition. Now this is an American edition with a pretty fancy cover, which is unlike most of the American editions. And I have to just pull this out. It's just one of the great covers in all of mystery fiction. The Last Stroke. This cover has been illustrated in many books, and in fact, in the Encyclopedia of Mystery and Detection, which I co-wrote in 19. It feels like 1876, 1976. This illustrates the essay on Lawrence Lynch that's in that book, just because it's such a great cover. So there we are. Here's another Dead Man's Step. All these beautiful covers. So Lawrence Lynch actually was called the American Conan Doyle when she was reviewed in the Topeka Blade or the Topeka Sun or whatever the name of the Topeka paper was, which I've now forgotten, but she was called the American Conan Doyle because she was so popular and pretty good at her job. There you are, Lawrence Lynch. Here's a paperback edition of one of her books. This is a reprint, it's later, with the weird back cover. Look at the illustrations on the back cover. Okay. Lawrence Lynch, thanks for watching.